This is my 2023 YT Izzo. This is the Core 4 build, and boy did I never think I was gonna have a luxury bike quite like this. The Core 4 build, as you can see, full Fox factory. It is SRAM X01. It is an unbelievably highly spec'd build, and as much as I am sad to hear that there are so many companies that are hurting with that much extra stock, I am all too happy to take advantage of an opportunity like this one when it came along. There's some changes that I made. It did come with G2 brakes. I swapped those off for my old SLX pair. I replaced the saddle and the dropper post. The Tellus actually I think is probably okay, but it does have machine marks on the telescoping post and it just felt weird. Handlebars also, just my preferences, went back to P&W. Tires, it came with Forecasters version 1. I pulled those both off. I'm running a Dissector up front and a Forecaster version 2 in the back. I did put a Cane Creek 40 headset in here. It comes with an Acros. That Acros headset has a massive rubber gasket on it that traps dust. And when dust gets in that headset, it squeaks obnoxiously. So it was just actually driving me completely insane. And that was a 100% must change item for me. This clamp did also have a massive rubber gasket. The rubber gasket came up as high as the collar on my current dropper, which was just preventing me from slamming this thing all the way, which is the whole reason I wanted this particular dropper on this bike. I did reach out to YT just to be like, hey, is there gonna be any issue with me modifying this? They said, no, go right ahead. You can even remove the whole thing if you wish, but I figured a little bit of material in there isn't the worst idea, just to help keep water and debris and stuff out. So I did just cut it down and then slam the post. The only issue that I personally have had that has caused me any discomfort is this crank set. It's a 175 crank. I'm not gonna say that shorter is better inherently, but I get knee pain with 175 mil cranks. At 170, that knee pain goes away. I would love a slightly shorter crank, just 5 mil. That would make a big difference to me and my comfort level. Now, when it comes to the geometry of this bike, it's a little bit conservative, and that doesn't surprise me a ton because the bike's been out for a number of years at this point. It's a 66-degree head tube angle. A 66-degree head tube angle in my terrain in Edmonton, Alberta is not gonna hold you back. Would I prefer it to be a little bit slacker? Yeah, I think a 65.5 or a 65 straight on, those make a little bit more sense to me. So one of the things that I will be looking to do down the road is putting an angle set on this bike to help a little bit. And I think it's just gonna be a 1/2 degree because that way, if I do wanna increase fork travel by 10 mil, I'm still sticking around that 65-degree mark. The wheelbase on this bike, I think it's 12, 14-ish, like tight, twisty, single track. This is where this bike shines. It's what this bike is built for. And you can tell that that's what this bike is for. But I don't think that an extra couple of mil in the wheelbase by slackening at the front end is going to have a negative impact on the way that this bike performs at all. So I don't think there's anything to lose by making this bike just a hair more aggressive. And it would not surprise me if we find that with the newest release of this bike, especially when you look at the direction that World Cup XC Geo has gone. To be looking at an Epic Evo at like 60, I think it literally is 65.5 degrees, or 65 maybe even, at 120 mil travel, I think 66-degree head tube angles are in the past now. I don't think we're gonna see a ton of them because again, you can just shorten the stem, speed up handling that way. I think the rear end, I'm really happy with the feel. I did remove one of the negative volume reducers out of that shock and I'm running it, there's a 3 position compression switch on this shock. So I've got it running full open and then in the softest of the 3 compression settings. So I haven't noticed any huge penalties when it comes to pedaling. I'm still very happy with the way that the bike pedals. It's definitely not as sharp as it was when it came out of the box, but it's a little bit more forgiving over rooty stuff. You can charge a little bit harder, and that's way more important to me.
One thing that I forgot to mention that's actually really important, with the fork in particular, I struggled for a while to get a setting that I was particularly happy with. And a lot of the reason for that was because there was a little bit of air that was stuck in the system. I don't know if it was like it's all assembled in Germany and then shipped to Canada. Like I don't know entirely how the build process works, but when I got that fork, they definitely needed to be bled. And unfortunately with this Fox 34 that I have on there currently, there's no bleed port. So you do have to slip a zip tie in behind the seal, but it actually, a surprising large amount of air came out. The other thing that needed to happen was I had to air down that fork entirely and then re-add air and make sure I was cycling the fork as I pumped it back up. There was a little bit of cavitating in it. I was able to eventually get it to a really nice place where it was a lot more responsive, but it just felt like you were hitting a brick wall. So bear in mind, there might be something a little weird like that if you are doing a mail order bike. And so a little bit of awareness or taking it to your local bike shop to have them set it up for you might yield much better results much faster.
YT recommends that you run this bike at 30% fork sag, which is a lot of sag. And so that's a setting that I haven't explored quite as much because it moves pretty radically away from all of my other experiences, which are, you know, a little bit stiffer, a little bit springier, poppier. And I like how poppy the fork is. If you're gonna be riding like flow trails, jumping on this bike is awesome. And so I don't wanna sacrifice that. I don't want an unbalanced bike where all of a sudden the front end is not supporting me the way that I need it to. So there's some things that I need to play around with there. I think this fork is plenty stiff at 130 mils of travel. I could put a larger air shaft in there, but I think with the larger air shaft, I'm going to end up suffering a little bit of flex induced. That's what I've found historically anyway. I think this is the same gen as the last one that I rode, so I would expect there to be some flex at that 140 mil. I think the current build in its entirety is such a well thought out package that I hesitate to move too far away from what's in front of me. But I do know that there are gains that can be made. And in fact, there are people who have run this bike with a 36. Man, I can tell you if you put a 36 with longer travel on this bike, you could absolutely mob this thing. Like, it's got the capacity to be a much more aggressive bike than it is in its current iteration. But for my use, undulating XC Edmonton track, I don't want more weight. I like this bike at the weight that it is. It's a 26, 27 pounds, somewhere in there, size large. It's an unbelievable weight. This isn't a bike that I would recommend to everybody, where I feel like in a lot of ways, the Ibis Ripley AF is a bike that I would just recommend to everybody. The rear end of this bike does hang up on square edge hits, but the bike also has a quality about it where it encourages you to play. Every time I get to a rooty section, I'm more likely to bunny hop over them or to unweight or to try to find like a really sneaky kind of line through them. At the end of the day, that's only improved my riding. But I do think, you know, to compare it to something like the Ripley AF, as much as that bike has a weight penalty, the dual link suspension, way smoother over chunkier stuff. Even at 130, I found that bike to be a little bit more competent with that slacker front end. That Geo really helped just push the capacity, and the weight of the AF also helped with stability. So it definitely is a step up in the aggressive ladder over a bike like this. There is a little bit of flex in the rear end. If you are looking for something to push super hard, there is a bit of flex in this. Whether that's good or bad is up to you. That's all the idiosyncrasies for this bike. As far as on-trail performance and what your expectations should be set, I think expect this to be exactly what it is. It's a long-legged cross-country bike. If you wanted to burly this bike up, if you wanted to improve descending capabilities, I would do it with geometry changes. I would just do an angle set. I think if you start talking about increasing fork travel or changing to a stiffer, larger, burlier fork, all of these things, it's sort of putting bigger tires on it. It's all antithetical to the intentions of this bike. I do think that it would benefit from slightly more aggressive geometry in the front end. But one of the challenges that I have actually is that the reach on the bike is already pretty comfortably short. I don't know that I want to go any shorter than this. If you increase the fork travel, if you slacken out the front end, both of those things are going to shorten the reach on this bike. So it's kind of already at that limit. I think what we're going to see for the next generation of this bike is a slightly slacker, slightly longer bike. And with those things, it's going to allow for a little bit more of aggressive descending capacity. It doesn't descend poorly, but it's definitely a lot more nervous.
One of the other challenges with this bike, and I think it has a lot to do with just how short it actually is that I find that I have to really consciously focus on pushing my hips back in my hinge to make sure that the bike handles the way that it's supposed to. When you find that sort of rearward position, man, the bike corners super well. Now, I'm also running a 50 mil stem instead of the 60 mil stem that the bike came stock with. While this does shorten the reach and theoretically pushes your weight back, to stay stable, it kind of changes the muscles that you're using. So you can't be quite as relaxed in that hinge. Like, you really are pushing the hips back so you feel that stretch through the hamstrings. I wouldn't say it's necessarily more fatiguing, but it's definitely a position that takes a little bit of getting used to if you are more accustomed to a very central, relaxed position.
There's a lot of things that you can change on a bike like this to make it more capable, and there's a lot of bikes out there that exist in that realm. But for me, for what I wanted, a bike that would allow me to pedal long distances, that I could potentially take bike packing because it's just super lightweight and pretty efficient, a bike that is poppy, playful, fun. A corner is really nice and aggressively. All of these things, this bike does it. And so for me, living in Edmonton, Alberta, man, this bike checks all the boxes. If you're curious, I don't know if there's still a couple of versions of this that are on sale. I don't know if they've got old stock or whatever, but check out YT's website. They might have a few things kicking around that you can get at a pretty incredible deal. So if they're available and you were looking for a bike in this universe, I definitely recommend checking them out. Thanks. We'll see you next time.